Do you think the government should help football clubs financially when the players are still receiving massive salaries compared to an average person's wage?
Right. Well, Alison, I was going to come to you because you Carlisle United FC, which plays in League Two, is warning it faces a 1.2 million shortfall. And I'm thinking about, obviously, you've got Merseyside now that's going into, or the Liverpool area as well that's going to restrictions. It's going to affect the clubs there too.
Yeah, football clubs are in a really bad situation, and we heard the point just now about players' wages, which is one side of it, that we've needed to regulate better and have a better system of governance in our national game for many years, and the virus has shown this in sharp relief.
So do you think the Premier League should dip into their pocket?
I think the Premier League have got to contribute, but I think it's bigger than that. The government promised in their 2019 manifesto a fan-led review of football governance, and the Minister says he wants to include finances as well. Labour agree with this, and I've been banging on about football finances and governance since I was first elected as a Member of Parliament in 2010. That's a lot of talk about football in 10 years. And
so what would Labour do now?
We have written to the government offering our principles for reviewing the regulations to make it better. Right now, if I was the Minister for Sport now, I would be getting the Premier League, the EFL, and all the parties round the table and saying, can we all stick to the principle that no football supporter in this country should lose a much-loved sports club just because of the virus? Now, we know that the finances of football have been, shall I say, challenging for a long time anyway. So we've got to separate out the changes that we need for the medium-term and the long-term viability of the game with a way of protecting clubs in the short term if it's just the virus that will tip them over. Because I've seen, whether it's what happened with Macclesfield recently or what happened with Bury, I've seen how it impacts people's as supporters when clubs go under. It's part of your identity. It's who you are, and football supporters deserve much better than they're getting at the moment.
David?
Look, I support a League One club in Scotland, which is not players on massive salaries, and I think one of the things that's really important for people to remember is that, yes, there are big football clubs out there, players that are on big wages, but for the vast majority of us in communities, it's small clubs, small teams who are really struggling at the moment. But one of the points I was making in the House of Commons this week to the government as well is about being mindful of the fact, my own constituency, Celtic Football Club, the biggest football club in Scotland, but it's about making sure that people remember that there's also a local economic aspect to this as well. I've got a 60,000-seater football stadium.
So what do you think should happen? What would you do to help the clubs lower down who are losing out because they aren't getting people in?
Well, we certainly need to go back and look again at the financial support that's offered to them, and the financial package that was brought forward by the Treasury, whether it's in furlough, whether it's the excluded 3 million, is just totally inadequate. The government has pulled a lot of that financial support, so I don't think that Rishi Sunak can get to Christmas without having to look again at the financial packages he's offered, because what he's put on the table so far is just not going to cut it for communities, for clubs, and most importantly for people who are really struggling at the moment.
Stuart, you a footy fan?
I am a football fan. I'm a Spurs fan for my pains. At the end of the day, the Premiership's got to help the smaller teams on the EFL, and they've got to do something. And there is a deal in place, as you know. The argument at the moment is about the access of foreign players coming in. So there's a three-way trade-off going on. If they let more foreign players come in, they'll give the money to the EFL. The EFL is saying, well, don't do that because you won't bring our youngsters through. So they've got to sort it out. But the industry needs to help itself, because fundamentally, as that gentleman said at the beginning, the people at the top end have got a disproportionate amount of the income and the revenues.
Jem, you've got your hand up.
It's just it's more of a statement than anything. Our local team, Carlisle United, they've really suffered recently, but what they've done is they have kept most of the money that people have paid for their season tickets, and they're allowing their fans to watch it online, so they're maintaining, some of the income and some of the revenue. And giving something back to the fans, which I think is really good. I think it's a really positive step.
And Helen, I can see you nodding away.
Yeah, this is a much wider issue than football clubs. And I have to say, I agree with the point that football should support football. The richer clubs should support the poorer clubs through this really difficult time. But we need to think about cricket clubs and rugby clubs and athletic grounds and all the other sporting facilities that are really suffering right now. And this, so yeah, football's great, but there are other sports out there too. So let's think about them all, please.
And Grant, the government has promised an emergency grant to the National League, so the 5th tier of English football. What about the rest of it? Is this something the government is eventually going to pitch in? in the way that David's suggesting, or are you going to leave it to the Premier League?
Well, look, I do think the Premier League does have much to give, as it were, in this. It's to their advantage that these players come up from the other teams, and if Carlisle are playing, I think, Barrow on Saturday, and
well, you've been swatting up, haven't you, Grant? Currying favour with our audience here.
But they will need to be able to carry on playing, as has been said. They've come up with their own innovative ways to do that, and we're looking at a bunch of things as well, like how you can use technology in football to help the clubs and help audiences and so on and so forth. But it is something that's been very hard at work with, and I do think that the Premier League is a significant part of the solution, as well as government and therefore taxpayer.
And Gordon, this was your question. What's your view?
I think that the football club should be, in a way, if you can demonstrate you can, by social distancing, you can stop the spread of the virus. The stadiums have all seated numbers, and I do think there should be allowed a certain amount of supporters to watch the game, and that would alleviate some of the pressure, both for the fans as well as the clubs. But the governing bodies should get together. I don't think the government should be involved at all, but I also think the players have a responsibility as well. Some of these players, I mean, OK, in the lower leagues they're not earning as much, but when we were furloughed and people were living off 80% for the wages, I dare say some footballers could live off 10% of their wage. Yeah, and I'm talking about obviously the real high earners here. So I do think it needs to be, all the governing bodies need to get together, sort it out. I don't think the government should be involved, because it's not just sport, it's not just football. I mean, there's other sports as well. And where they can, they should help the lower clubs. That's my opinion.
God, well, Grant, it's a rare thing where we have where people tell you that the government shouldn't be involved, I think, at the moment.
Absolutely.
So there you are. So you can enjoy that moment while it lasts.
That point about letting the spectators in the stadium, that was something we were hoping to move towards on a test basis. But we have this, absolute desire to have schools and work back, and we can't, if the R rate is above 1, do other discretionary things. When we get it down, we can do these other things, which will help the football clubs and all other sport.